Hey everyone, welcome back to Chit Chat. My name is Guy. I am your host. Thank you so much for continuing to listen to this podcast. I just got done recording a podcast with my friend Denny Peterson, Dr. Denny. I've known Denny for probably 20 years, and he is just truly one of my absolute favorite guys. And he's warm and kind. His approach to medicine is refreshing, and his approach to our community, this community here that we love in St. Cloud, as a kind of recent transplant, is really, really neat and also really refreshing. So I'm excited, so excited for you to listen to this podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Dr. Denny, welcome. Thank you so much for coming and joining us on the podcast. It's wonderful to see you. I always love seeing you. And B, I'm just really thankful to hop in and have this fun little conversation.
Thanks a lot, Guy. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am a father, a grandfather, a husband, and I'm a doctor. I am in the process of retiring from a very long career as a family physician. Initially practiced in Wilmer, Minnesota for about 22 years before moving here and joining the University of Minnesota Centric Care in a teaching program for family medicine. And I've been doing that for 10.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I've known Denny for a long time. I met Denny first probably when I was a senior in high school. Denny's son Josh and I were dear friends through. I guess we met in high school, and then we ended up going to the same school together at Northwestern. We were roommates in college. We sang in college choir together, all of that fun stuff. But Josh and I first met when we were singing in all-state choir together. Yeah. And so I think we probably met you then, and then really got to know you and Denise while Josh and I were living together. Denny, I am excited to talk to you for a couple of reasons today. One, I think you're just a lovely human being. I thoroughly enjoy all of my conversations with you. Two, I think that you have a unique perspective in that you had an entire career's worth of work not in the St. Cloud community. You raised your family not in St. Cloud. You were in Wilmer. And then as empty nesters, you moved to St. Cloud. And I'd love to talk to you about that. And then also, I just think over the years, you and I have talked about your approach to your job and to your work and how you kind of have folded your personal life into your work in just kind of some neat ways, which I think is a valuable and admirable thing. And so I'd love to just, I think, talk to you a little bit about that too. So maybe, would you just tell me a little bit more about, so you were a doctor in Wilmer for 22 years, like you just said, and then you came here. Maybe just give me a little flyover, like how did you make that decision? And then how and why did you end up here in St. Cloud? How did you pick St. Cloud and subsequently Centicare?
So first of all, I'm going to go way back.
All right.
I was raised in a small farm town, Canby, Minnesota, which is way on the western edge of the state. My experience in that community was augmented by my mom's background as an RN, and she was actually an RN in World War II. And so not very many women of her age had college degree and ended up in that level or that field. So I was very exposed to medicine as a young man. And especially, I had a mentor by the name of Dr. John Myers, who was just a wonderful small-town country doc who did everything. And so I was always excited and passionate about medicine. But even more so, the recognition of how a small-town family doc really augments the community. When there's no access to medical care in a small community, those small communities usually dry up and sort of die away. They end up with an elevator and maybe a
grain elevator.
A grain elevator and maybe a country gas station. Yep. But even those things don't stay very long unless there's a reason for somebody to come to that community. And medical care was a big reason for a lot of people to stay in those communities. So as I went into medicine, actually started in medicine, I was initially working for 3M in South Florida, and I was working for the ophthalmology department of 3M. And so I was planning to go back and become a rural ophthalmologist. But what happened was I got into medical school and I started doing my rotations, and I found that everything I did I just loved. Every component of learning was just a wonderful experience. And to try and take myself away from one thing and just focus on doing eyes was really unfulfilling. And I think partly because I just really love the concept of people. I love the concept of family. And I love the interaction that my opportunity in medicine brought to the field of medicine.
So are you juxtaposing that against like family medicine where you get to like deal with the whole person?
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah.
So when I started in Wilmer, that was now close to 30 years ago, the opportunity to really be an independent practice existed. And so my partnership with initially 3 other doctors grew over the period of that 25 years to a large clinic with 8 physicians and, by the time I left, 2 additional nurse practitioners. So it just really grew and blossomed as what happens when you have a good business and a good model of care. And our model of care was really very much full spectrum. So we all delivered babies. We all saw our patients in the hospital. We covered the emergency room. If our patient was in the hospital, we walked across the street to see them. We saw them in the morning. We saw them at night. And so the continuity of care was very unique. And that's all changed over 30 years. There were very few now that still do what we used to do.
And do you think it's changed because preference has changed, or do you think the system has changed enough that it's just not, that kind of thing isn't possible for some reason anymore? Why doesn't that happen anymore? Because it sounds great. I mean, it sounds like wonderful medicine.
Yeah, it really is. There's a lot of factors that have changed. Lifestyles have changed. The expectations of what people want to work and how long they want to work, and the responsibility as far as call goes of being on call has really changed. It's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And now there's very few. In fact, I think in the city of St. Cloud, there's only about 10 of us, maybe faculty, 8 to 10 of us that actually do everything in the hospital and cover clinic as well. Everybody else will take call, but they never go to the hospital.
Yeah.
So it's very different, and very few are doing obstetrics anymore.
Yeah. So in your career, how many babies do you think you've delivered?
Maybe 1,500, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's a lot of lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your first baby that you delivered was 30 some odd years ago, probably.
Yep.
Yeah. And now, neat that those babies that you first were delivering are now having their own babies, and that's a long, full career.
Yeah. In fact, when I moved here, I had a number of young ladies who traveled all the way from Wilmer to come here because I had delivered them, and then they wanted to have me deliver their baby. It didn't last very long because it just doesn't, it's not sustainable, but it was an honor. And
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Really incredible.
Yeah. But I would say that the practice styles are very different here as compared to a community like Melrose or Sauk Rapids, where those communities are still very much practicing much the way I did.
Yeah.
And I honor those small town docs. That's really one of the reasons I came here. You asked me, why did I leave? And I remember sitting in my office late one night. I was waiting for a delivery, and I was just contemplating my future. And I had really realized that I'd accomplished just about everything that I wanted to accomplish. I had a son who was in Denver. Josh was in Denver Seminary at that time. I had a daughter in Haiti who was working at an orphanage. And my other daughter was in Seattle. So realized that our kids probably weren't going to come back to that small community. They had pretty much made that decision. And I really realized that if there was ever an opportunity for me to extend into medical education, which I'd always dreamed of doing, and I always had students and residents working with me all throughout my career, I really realized that if I was going to do it, I needed to do it then, when I could put a substantial amount of time and effort and make a difference.
Yeah.
And so that was the reason for transferring.
Yeah.
It's a reason for being here. And I really believe that is still my love for rural medicine and the desire to teach,
Yeah.
family medicine for rural medicine and rural facilities has been my passion.
That's neat.
Yeah.
In these kind of like small towns, what small towns that have hospitals or have some sort of medical presence, what is it that causes, like what's the thing that causes medicine or that hospital to actually leave?
I think eventually it's the inability for that facility to be either competitive, much like a small Ace Hardware trying to compete with Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards. There's a certain number of people who always would rather go and get that, hey, Jim, where's the, screwdriver I need, right?
Yeah.
And there's a certain level of trust and connectivity that you get in that small shop.
Yeah.
And I think in communities, to some degree, you don't have a lot of options, right? But that being said, you may have limited options, but transportation is much more accessible now than ever before. So the capacity to drive 30, 40, 50 miles to see a physician or a provider is not just understood as okay, it's almost expected at times.
Yeah.
So at some point in time, sometimes those small community facilities, whether it's a hospital or a clinic, just can't compete.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see somebody in a community 30 miles away that's making, 30, 40% more in salary, working 30, 40% less with 30 to 40% less risk and liability.
Yeah.
And so it takes a real special individual that's willing to stay there. It takes a real special individual that's willing to commit not just themselves but their family to live in that community, be
And
raised in that
kind
community.
of a different pace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the expectations are so high now. Everyone wants it to be perfect. Everyone sets you up to be, you have to be a mini Mayo Clinic regardless of where you are.
Yeah.
And, that line of, well, then I'll just go to Mayo. Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
But those are the kind of statements that can kill a community. They can kill a small business. They can kill a hospital. One lawsuit can drain the pockets of a community and completely destroy the confidence. I've seen a lot of people destroyed.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is easy to forget, because medicine feels so big, right? Like it feels, maybe because so much of the conversation around medicine has kind of like a national kind of tone to it, it feels sometimes like it's just this big, giant behemoth, but it's actually made up. All of these providers, so many of these providers, especially in small communities, are actually just like small business owners, and they're just doing the exact same thing that I'm doing. It's just instead of like holding a camera in their hand, their trade that they're providing to the community is medicine. And that, all of those things that you said, like, these are the things that, like, in small business that we deal with all the time.
Yeah,
and sometimes
absolutely.
it's just easy to forget that it isn't just capital M medicine, but these medical providers are lowercase m medical providers. They're just human beings that are trying to provide for their families and so.
And care for people.
And
Ultimately, it's the relationship that you share across the desk from me or across the chair from me. That's the gut of it all, right? And it does get expounded in somewhat of a perverted way because that's what society does now. We lose the intimacy and we lose the personality and we categorize and we generalize, and it robs us from joy.
Denny, you have never been my physician. I don't think I've ever been in your clinic or your office in any sort of like medical capacity. So I don't know for sure what you are like as a doctor. But when I have, and again, I've known you now for 20 years basically. Whenever I have described you to people like, oh yeah, Denny, like this is, I think every single time I have described you like this, and I don't know if I've ever said this to you before, but you remember me in a kind of way that is abnormal. And I also, I realize that you are the father of a friend of mine and a roommate. Like there are other ways that we've kind of known each other other than just running into each other. But I also have those relationships with other people as well. And in every capacity or every category that I could kind of like sort you in, you have remembered, not just like remembered me, but like things about me, like an intentionality and things that I told you in passing 6 months ago or a year ago, and you would, when you see me, you would ask intentional questions. And so what I always, has been impressive to me, and why I know you were a good doctor and are currently, for however many years you continue to practice, are a good doctor, is because that thing, you can't turn that thing on and off.
That's right.
That kind of ability to just like engage with someone as a human being. And so in ways that were memorable and notable and deep and really frivolous. I think that's like just silly, superficial things of just like remembering preferences or habits or things like that. Yeah. And then remembering like how my family's doing and asking me intentional questions. I have always noted and known how special it was that you do that. And so I'm excited now just like to thank you for that. I mean, you have been an encouragement to me just in the way that you have engaged with me as a human being. And it's also, it's a sweet challenge to live in a kind of way with a kind of intentionality towards people that is notable and meaningful. And so like I think you set a great example for others in how you approach them.
Well, thank you, Guy. That's a wonderful compliment.
And so I hope that there are, maybe there are people listening right now who are contemplating a career. They are science-minded. They are healthcare-minded. I hope that they jump in and maybe would think about rural medicine, and whether it's rural medicine or not, but a kind of intentional medicine where you're thinking about a whole person. What a neat thing to pass on.
I want to say thank you. It's a wonderful compliment. But it's not hard to remember people like you, Guy. So anyway, I just want to say
that's sweet. But hear me. The way that you have done that, it doesn't feel individual to me. There's a way that you navigate that thing that feels endemic to like who you are as a person. And so, anyway, that's wonderful. And so,
well, thank you.
Yeah.
I do think that to some degree it's a learned skill.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. What a great skill to learn. What a takeaway. Yeah. What a takeaway. Intentionality is something that you can learn. You don't have to be born with it. You can just choose to learn it.
It is. I mean, just like you're sitting here and interviewing, you're natural at that. But it's getting easier and easier each time you do it.
I hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, well, Denny, I think one of the interesting things, and I alluded to it at the beginning, is that you are new-ish to the St. Cloud community. But just the fact that you came in with a family, but you didn't bring your family. You were empty nesters. You approached this community in a kind of way that I don't know many people who have approached it kind of at that stage of life and in the way that you have, which I think is fascinating and really, really interesting. Would you just kind of share, like, as you've engaged in becoming a resident of St. Cloud and plugging in the ways that you have at your job and at your church and in your community and neighborhood, I've kind of experienced all of those things with you. What have you noticed about our community? What are some of the things that you think make St. Cloud special?
Well, I love the centrality of St. Cloud.
Do you mean like geographically?
Geographically, yeah. I mean, being a very small town boy, a community like this was huge to me.
Sure.
To me, this is more than adequately sized for everything I want. I have lived in large communities. I've lived in the metro area. I've lived in Duluth. I've lived in South Florida. The beauty of this community is that from here you can get to just about anywhere.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate because most people don't come to St. Cloud unless they're going somewhere.
Sure.
And so for me, this has always been I got to go through St. Cloud to get somewhere, and until we moved. As far as connecting and becoming a integral part of the community, it was less of an issue for me because I immediately was thrown into the business of medicine, to the practice of medicine, to the practice of teaching, to a group of people that immediately became my new home, and where I put long hours into building that those relationships and my responsibilities in that. For Denise, it was harder. I think as any community, I think outsiders struggle to connect with any community, and I think that especially resonates with our refugee population here, and with the many people who have moved to this community because it's a reasonable cost of living here compared to larger communities, metro areas. It's peaceful, it's quiet, it's safe. Sometimes I actually have to stop during rush minute and on my way to work, and I don't worry, I don't fret as I'm driving. That never happens when you're driving on the freeway or the metro. And so the privilege of a community this size is its ability to offer all that people want, yet the quiet, safe, everybody can find problems no matter where they go.
And that's in any and every community ever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I loved that about St. Cloud. And I think for Denise, it took a lot more effort. But if you knew Denise, and you do know Denise, there's not anybody who doesn't want to be with her and wants her around. Her smile is infectious. Her laughter is infectious. So she's the kind of person that everybody wants to be a friend to and have as a friend. And so it didn't take long for her to invest into some relationships and for those to come back in great rewards. And she did that largely through our church, through Bible Study Fellowship, which was a really great program for meeting people, not just a small community, but a extensive community across the faith community in this area. The other thing that Denise and I have done that has been extremely rewarding is that we've invested into the life of some refugee families. We became very active with Arrive Ministries. And I guess I want to say sponsored and adopted a couple families and have been very much active in supporting in that. And that has just been a beautiful tool to help us remember how very, very thankful and grateful we are for what we have and for the opportunity to share that and to give a little bit of what we have to stabilize and help people transition, just like we did 10 years ago.
Would you maybe just unpack a little bit more about that for people that are maybe, they're aware of the refugee families and the people in central Minnesota that maybe don't speak English well yet, but they don't exactly know how to jump in and engage. What has that process been like of meeting when you're talking about refugee families, I'm guessing you're talking primarily Somali families. What has it been like to kind of plug in? What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about your Somali neighbors? And what could someone else do to kind of jump in?
Well, first of all, I think one of the beautiful experiences I've had is participating in my clinic, which is the Family Health Center on Northway. And that clinic, because it's a residency-based clinic, we serve primarily the underserved, those who don't have access to insurance, who are struggling financially, struggling with mental health issues. And they're, in many cases, oftentimes a forgotten population, right? Everybody, and I'll just use my example, for 20 plus years, I saw patients who progressively became more and more like me, white, able to pay their bills, compliant with making their appointments. And if they didn't, then there was always somebody else waiting in line.
Sure.
And so many times those who sometimes get forgotten, get pushed aside, and lose access to care. And my clinic, the one here in St. Cloud, is the clinic that really does that. We are the ones who have the resources to provide interpreter care. In fact, I think we were around 20% of our population, our visits are interpreted.
Wow.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And it's not just Somali. It's, Latino and Afghani and many of the Eastern African countries.
Yeah.
So there's a tremendous diversity of people here. And so, first of all, just being connected with that experience alone was a great learning tool for me, a great opportunity to become more versed in diversity, and recognizing that that's part of our role in our residency is to create diversity and to hire diversity, both not just gender, but with men and women who speak those languages. And I think this year we have one of our residents speaks Oromo. Last year we had 2 Somali graduates of our program. This year we have a Nepali student who graduated. It's been rich.
That's really neat.
And so it's been a real learning thing for me. But our personal step into that was really with Arrive Ministries. And Arrive has stepped up to do a lot of the same work that Lutheran Social Services has done for years as far as bringing and supporting refugee health and transition to the state here. And so we were asked by Andrew and Samantha Grimsley to consider being a sponsor, and we sponsored an Afghani young man who was a Fulbright scholar at St. Cloud State and who came here just 3 weeks before the fall of Kabul and left his wife and 2 children in a very dangerous and threatening situation. So it was a wonderful opportunity to understand the plight of the Afghani, to understand the difficulties of losing hope and access to education and women's rights, and especially when you leave an educated wife and 2 young daughters in that environment. So our friend Iqbal needed that support, and it was a real joy to eventually see his family come here and participate, and now they're like our second little family, our extra grandkids.
It's really sweet. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Really, really appreciate it.
You bet.
Denny, as you have jumped into this community, what has been meaningful or noteworthy as you've tried to actually get plugged in here in the community?
Being a transplant.
Yeah.
Recognizing that the only way you truly transplant is to become connected to whatever body you're trying to transplant to, right? So in medicine, we transplant organs,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But it takes work. It takes a lot of sacrifice and suffering. It takes effort. But until you really dig yourself into the meat of what's in your surroundings, then transplantation really doesn't happen. It can be a beautiful thing when it truly happens, and maybe it can be a terrible thing when it's rejected.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people who oftentimes feel that rejection, especially people who are not used to this community. And that's just because they don't know the language, they don't know the culture, they don't know the church, they don't speak the right words, they don't have the right slang, they don't have the right language. And it only takes sometimes a real negative experience for people to turn around and go away.
Yeah.
And so the way that I think we, as though that are now embedded here, transplanted here, need to look at it is to begin the process of being receptive. And how do you become receptive in a way that allows that transplantation to happen?
You said that it maybe only takes one small negative thing. I think the flip side might also be true.
Yeah.
It might
Only
just
take one positive.
one small positive reaching out from someone who's plugged in the community to really make you feel like you're actually welcome and involved.
Right. I've thought about that an awful lot lately. That when we begin our day, if we focused more on being a blessing to somebody else, that if we could be a blessing to someone, then it's likely that somebody will be well received.
Yeah.
But when we create negativity, when we create reactivity, we're most likely to see a bounce in another direction, not a clinging.
Yeah. Well, sweet. Denny, I'm so thankful. Thank you for coming. Thanks for joining the podcast. It is always good to see you. And it's just sweet to hear your perspective on our community. I'm thankful for the work that you have done at continue to grow and educate young doctors who will head into the world thinking holistically about how to approach the human body and the human person. And I'm really thankful for how you guys have plugged into our community here. You have made St. Cloud a better place. So thanks for doing all of that. As we close our show, our little podcast here, we do an unpaid ad. Can you think of someone or something that you would like to give a shout out to?
Well, like I said before, I didn't really have a chance to really think about this very well. But I'm going to encourage people to look into the opportunity of being a brother or a sister, a mother or a father to the underserved, to the refugee, to the one that's different. And that might be by participating with a ministry like Arrive Ministries or even with Lutheran Social Services. Some people struggle with the influx of people who are different.
Sure.
But just like you and I are sitting across from each other, the relationship that there is rich and beautiful and great when it's fostered.
Yeah.
And we need to foster the relationships of those who are different because they can teach us an awful lot.
Well, wonderful. Thanks, Denny.
You're welcome.
And my unpaid ad for the day, on a lighter note, is anything grilled or smoked that comes off of Denny's big green egg. That would be my unpaid ad. It's real good, real tasty.
Most excellent.
Well, sweet. Thank you, Denny. Appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Likewise. Bye, too.